Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really pivotal time in Japanese history. We're talking about how local power and land ownership really transformed.
Yeah, it's a fascinating period. We'll be looking especially at the rise of these private estates, the Shōen, and also how the warrior class started to emerge as a major force.
Right. So how did things shift from the older land system to this new setup? It feels like a crucial piece of the puzzle for understanding later Japanese history.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's start at the ground level in the countryside, the old Ritsuri land system. Well, it was starting to creak a bit, showing its age.
Okay.
And you begin to see these ambitious local clans and even powerful farmers really starting to gain economic strength.
They weren't just farming then.
No, not passively. They were actively involved in developing new fields, Kanden Kaihatsu, and bringing other, less powerful farmers under their influence, really building local power bases.
Got it. So these local bigwigs start emerging. How did the official provincial governors, the kokushi, react to that?
Well, the Kokushi weren't blind to this. They saw these influential figures had real capability, so they started entrusting them with land cultivation and, crucially, tax collection for specific periods.
Ah, okay. Outsourcing almost.
Kind of, yeah. These individuals were called Tato, and interestingly, the land they managed often ended up being named after them, becoming Mike or Meiston.
So the land gets personalized in a way.
Exactly. And then you see a natural progression. Some of these Tato managed to build really strong ties with the Kokushi,
Right. Networking.
pretty much. And this allowed them to expand their operations significantly. They became what we call daimyo, managing really large areas of land.
Daimitako, so like great name field cultivators.
Something like that, yeah. And as these daimyo grew stronger through the 10th and 11th centuries, they effectively cemented their control over specific territories. They evolved into Kaihatsu Rishu development lords.
Development lords. Okay. So they're really establishing themselves.
They're becoming the real regional power brokers.
So you have this sort of bottom-up rise of power with these Kaihatsu Rishu. How did the existing government structure, the kokushi, adapt?
Well, the Kokushi responded. They reorganized their administrative areas into smaller, more localized units, districts, and villages.
Makes sense. More manageable units.
Yeah, and here's the clever part. They often appointed these very same Kaihatsu Rishu to head these new units.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as district officials, Gunji, or village officials, Guji, making them responsible for tax collection within those units.
So co-opting them into the system.
Exactly. It was a way to, integrate this new power structure rather than just fight it directly, recognizing reality on the ground.
Okay, that's a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And this, I guess, leads us towards the manners, right? How did they come about?
Precisely. So these Kaihatsu Rishu, they're powerful now, but they still face potential interference from the Kokushi or maybe other lords.
Right. Always looking over their shoulder.
So they came up with a really ingenious solution. They started donating their territories, these gun and go they controlled, to powerful central entities.
Donating them. Why?
To protect them. They donate them to major temples, important shrines, or high-ranking court nobles in the capital.
Ah. So by putting the land under a powerful, maybe untouchable name.
Exactly. It created a kind of buffer. The Kokushi would think twice before interfering with land technically belonging to, say, a powerful temple or a top court noble. This created the Shōen.
So it wasn't just about being pious, it was strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Brilliant strategy. This act of donation created these private manors.
Okay, so you donate the land. Who actually benefits? Who's in charge?
Well, the initial recipient, the temple or noble who received the donation, was called the rinke.
The Rike.
But often, for even more security, the rinke might donate it again to someone even higher up, more prestigious. That higher level patron was the hunk.
Layers of protection.
Exactly. But the entity that held the real practical control and got the main economic benefits was called the honjo.
Hanjo. Okay. And the original guy, the Kaihatsu Rishushu, who donated in the first place, what happened to him?
Well, he didn't just disappear. He often stayed on as a local manager, a manor official, or shoken.
So he still runs the place day to day.
Pretty much, yeah, with titles like Gishi. So, in effect, donating the land actually strengthened his local control, but now under the umbrella of the Shōen.
Wow. That's quite a system.
It is. And these specific donation-based manners, the Kishinchi Keishon, they really become common after the mid-11th century. It's important to distinguish them from earlier types of estates that sometimes get called Shōen too.
You mentioned a map earlier. That sounds like it could really bring this to life.
Yes, there's a fantastic illustrated map, an izu, of a specific manor called Katsuragita Manor, Katsuragita no Sho in Ki Province. It belonged to Jingoji Temple.
What does it show?
It gives you a real feel for the place. You can see a Hachimangu shrine marked at the northeast end. You see houses dotted along the base of the mountains and along the Kiya River, which is the Kinokawa River today.
So a real settlement.
Oh, yeah. And crucially, it shows the boundaries, marking out exactly what belonged to the manor. This particular one started developing way back in the early 9th century, but it was donated to Jingoji late in the 12th century.
That really helps visualize it. Okay, so these Shōen are set up, protected by powerful patrons. What kind of advantages did that give them? Perks.
Big ones, especially regarding taxes. Some Shōen managed to get fuyuno, the right of tax exemption,
Tax-free land. How?
through the clout of their patrons, basically. You had Kanshibuna Shōen. These were manors owned by powerful temples or nobles, and they got tax exemption directly through imperial decrees or decrees from the Ministry of Popular Affairs, top-level approval.
Okay.
Then you also had kokumanosho. These were granted tax exemption by the local kokushi themselves, more common in the mid-Heian period.
So different ways to get out of paying taxes.
Yeah. Exactly. Think of it like different levels of immunity depending on who granted it.
Were there other privileges besides tax exemption?
Oh, yes. A really significant one was funya, the right of non-entry.
Non-entry, meaning?
Meaning officials sent by the kokushi, like the kendenshi, the guys who came to survey fields for tax assessment, they were legally barred from entering the shin.
Wow. So the government inspectors literally couldn't come in.
Correct. Imagine that. The shins are becoming these autonomous zones, islands outside the direct reach of provincial government.
That's a massive shift in power, isn't it?
Huge.
So the Kokushi must have hated this. Tax-free zones they couldn't even... What did they do? Did they try to fight back?
They certainly tried. They issued things called Shimseri-rei Manor Consolidation Ordinances, basically attempts to regulate the Shin, review their privileges, try to rein them in.
And did it work?
Often not very effectively. They faced a lot of resistance from the powerful patrons, the temples, the nobles backing these Shin. It was an uphill battle for the Kokushi.
So the Shōen are becoming more established, more independent. What about the land outside the Shōen? What happened there?
Good question. As the Shōen system solidified, the provincial governors, especially the upper-level ones called zuri, started managing the remaining land, the land not part of a Shōen, more like their own private domains.
Oh, okay.
These lands were known as kuris, sometimes called kokugarus, basically.
Yeah.
Public lands managed by the provincial government office, but increasingly treated like private holdings by the zuri.
So you have Shōen on one hand, Ku-Shōen on the other. How was the land actually worked in these areas?
Interestingly, in both Shōen and Kurush, the bulk of the cultivated land was typically divided into these units we mentioned earlier, the maiten.
Right, the named fields.
And each maiten was allocated to an influential local farmer called a maishu.
Meishu. Are these the same as the Tado or Daimyo earlier?
Often they were, or they evolved from them, yes. These maishu were really the key figures in the villages now.
What was their role exactly?
They were like local managers. They'd employ other peasants, dependent laborers called jinin, or tenant farmers called sakunin, to actually work parts of the land.
Okay.
And the maishu were the ones responsible for paying the taxes, the nengu, annual rent in kind, and kuji, various service dues, upwards either to the shunshin lord or to the zuri in the case of kuji.
So they're the crucial link in the chain.
Absolutely. They become the central figures in rural society. This whole system, Shun and Kuji, managed through Minjin, run by Maishu, marks a really definitive break from the old Ritsuri way of doing things.
It sounds like a much more fragmented, localized system of control.
It was. And this environment, this shifting power landscape and local instability, it also created the perfect conditions for something else to grow.
Which was?
The warrior bands, the Bushidan.
Oh, the samurai precursors. How do they fit in?
Well, these Shinyan and Kuji became the economic bases, the home turf, for these growing local warrior groups.
So they're drawing their power from these new land structures.
Yeah. Exactly. And the leaders of these bands, the Tories, they often came from the ranks of local officials. Remember the Aichukenjin we mentioned, or maybe even former Zuri themselves, people with local standing and military skill.
Right. And these warrior bands eventually give rise to some really famous names, don't they? The Taira and Minamoto clans.
Yes, precisely. In the Kanto region, for example, After some earlier disturbances called the Juche Tenji disturbances, the Kan Muhishi, that's the Taira clan, became quite influential.
Okay.
But then, in 1028, one of them, Taira no Teratsuna, rebelled. And this was a major event.
Rebellion. How was it handled?
The court sent Minamoto no Yorinobu from the Seiwa Genji, the Minamoto clan, to put it down.
And he succeeded.
He did. And his success was huge for the Minamoto. It really allowed them to expand their own influence massively in the Kanto region, sort of stepping into the space the Taira lost.
So these conflicts were actually opportunities for these warrior clans to grow their power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were proving their military value and establishing regional dominance.
Did the Minamoto stop there in Kanto?
Oh no. Yorinobu's son, Yoriyoshi, and particularly his grandson, Yoshi, were very ambitious. They pushed north into the Shu region, that's Mutsu and Dewa provinces.
Up in the northeast.
Right. They fought major campaigns there. The former 9 Years' War against the Abe clan, and then the later 3 Years' War against the Kiyohara clan.
Sounds intense.
It was. And Minamoto no Yoshi, although his original base was further west in Setsu, was really smart about it. He built up extensive networks of loyalty, lord-vassal relationships with warrior bands all across Kanto and Shu.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. This was absolutely foundational for the Minamoto becoming the dominant warrior power in eastern Japan later on.
Now, you mentioned Shu. There was another powerful family up there too, right? The Shu Fujiwara.
Yes, the Shu Fujiwara, they were a major force in the north. Interestingly, they actually worked with Minamoto no Yoshi in some of those northern campaigns.
Allies then.
At that time, yes. And after those wars, they really flourished for 3 generations under Kiyohira, Motohira, and Hidehira, based in their capital, Hirozumi. They became incredibly powerful in their own right.
What happened to the Taira in Kanto after Tadetsun's rebellion? Did they just fade away?
Their power in Kanto definitely decreased, but a branch of the Taira clan actually settled over in East Province near the capital region.
Okay, shifted focus.
Yeah, and they built a new power base there, extending into Iga Province too. And later figures like Taira no Masamori and his son Tadamori were quite shrewd. They used shun donations to gain favor at court and also built influence in Western Japan by serving as provincial governors, as ziryu.
So the Taira found other paths to power. Let's circle back to the Shu Fujiwara, though. 3 generations of power in the north sounds pretty significant.
Oh, it was huge. Kiyohira, the founder, was incredibly effective. He inherited a title, Chief of the Eastern Barbarians, Bani no Chu, which gave him standing in Mutsu and Dewa. And when Minamoto no Yoshi eventually got dismissed as governor of Mutsu, Kiyohira really seized that moment to build an independent power base.
How powerful did they become?
Very. They controlled a vast area, basically all of Mutsu and Dewa, from the Shirakawa barrier right up to Tsugaru. And crucially, they were supported by Shu's rich gold resources.
Oh, okay, that helps.
Definitely. And their capital, Hiraizumi, became this splendid center. That's where Kiyohira built the famous Chusanji temple complex.
And his successors kept it going?
Yes. His son, Motohira, actually lived without official court rank, maybe to emphasize their independence. He even clashed with the governor of Mutsu at one point, refusing a land survey.
Asserting their autonomy.
Exactly. Then the third leader, Hidehira, he actually did gain high court titles, Governor General of the North, Shinjufu Shogun, and Governor of Mutsu, which is interesting.
How so?
Well, it shows their power was recognized by the center, but perhaps also that the central government's influence was slowly extending, trying to incorporate them more formally.
It sounds like Hirozumi wasn't just a military base, but a cultural center, too.
Absolutely. The culture there was a fascinating mix of influences from Kyoto, the imperial capital, but also distinct northern elements. Archaeology is revealing really wide-ranging trade and cultural links by land and sea.
A northern powerhouse. But it didn't last forever.
No. Their position became precarious once Minamoto no Yoritomo started consolidating his power in eastern Japan, aiming to establish the Kamakura shogunate.
Ah, the rise of Yoritomo.
Right. And the situation became critical when Yoritomo's own brother, the famous Yoshitsune, fled north and sought refuge with Hidehira in Hirozumi.
That put the Shu Fujiwara in a difficult spot.
Extremely. It basically made them a target for Yoritomo. After Hidehira died, Yoritomo saw his chance. In 1189, he led a massive Kamakura army north and defeated the Shu Fujiwara, bringing their rule to an end.
And Yoritomo saw Hirozumi for himself then.
He did. And reports say he was genuinely stunned by the level of wealth, the sophistication, the culture he found there. Yeah, so much so that when he went back to Kamakura, he built a temple, a Fukuji, and apparently modeled part of it, a two-storied pagoda directly on the Nijinotu Tower he'd seen at Chusanji in Hirazumi.
Wow. A tribute, almost, to the culture he'd just conquered.
You could see it that way. It certainly shows the impact Hirazumi had.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've seen this huge transformation. The old land system fades, the Shōen system emerges through these complex donations and power plays involving local lords, governors, temples, nobles.
Right, driven by the Kaiatsu Rishu and their desire for security and autonomy.
And alongside this, or maybe because of it, the warrior class, the Bushi, grows significantly, leading to powerful regional clans like the Minamoto, the Taira, and the Shu Fujiwara.
It all intertwines. The land system changes, create new power bases, and these power bases support the rise of the warriors. It really sets the stage for medieval Japan.
Definitely. It makes you think, doesn't it? This whole period shows such an intricate balance, or maybe imbalance of power, between local forces, the central court, religious institutions, all centered around control of land.
It really does. And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about is how these dynamics play out elsewhere. Can you see parallels between this period in 10th, 11th, 12th century Japan, the fragmentation of central authority, the rise of local lords, the importance of land tenure, and similar transitional periods in other societies you might have studied?
That's a great point. Comparing these patterns of power, land, and identity formation across different cultures and times can be really insightful.
There's so much depth here. In the individual stories and the broader shifts, it's definitely worth digging into further.